Hello and welcome to FPL Mate, your best mate for fantasy Premier League content for the 2023-24 season. My name is Dan and we have got some real new key information for you guys that is going to shape the rest of your season. You're going to have to make some crucial decisions in the next few days, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that at all. So in this video, guys, we are going to cover the full projected fixture schedule, including projected blanks and double game weeks from game week 34 and beyond. We're going to go through the 3 best chip strategies from now and then, and we're going to talk about a game week 27 wildcard and a game week 29 free hit as well. Guys, I have not slept since the 10 p.m. FA Cup results last night. So guys, all I ask is for you to drop a like for the work that's gone into this video. Hopefully it is going to be worth it, and make sure you do subscribe if you want more content too. So let's start off by looking at the calendar. Here is the double and blanks projections for the rest of the season. We know that game week 28 is a double game week. We know 34 and 37 are also going to be double game weeks as well, with potential blanks in 34 as well. For 32, 33, 35 and 36, there is a potential for double game weeks as well. But because these kind of game weeks clash with European fixtures, we might not see as many doubles in those particular game weeks. But we need to go through this, starting off with game week 29, which we now know exactly who is going to double and who is going to blank, because in many of these games, because of the FA Cup results, many of these teams have got their fixtures postponed because they are clashing, they're cup tied, they're clashing in game week 29. There is not time for them to play both their Premier League games and the FA Cup games. So their game week 29 fixtures has to be moved across to game week 34. So now you can see the new game week 29, and we've got Aston Villa, we've got Brentford, Burnley, Fulham, Luton Town, Nottingham Forest, Tottenham Hotspur and West Ham. These are the only 8 teams that are going to have a fixture in game week 29. Everyone else will blank. So guys, have a look at your team right now and think, how many players do you have ready to go for game week 29 now? Are you going to have to do something in order to try and work out how to actually field a full 11 in game week 29? It is going to be tough, but we're going to try and help you out here. But also we can now see game week 34, while we've got a whole bunch of new fixtures in there, creating some double game weeks. But if only it was that easy. It really isn't. It looks great, but it isn't, because the FA Cup semi-finals clashes with game week 34. So we need to work out, okay, who is going to be in the FA Cup semi-finals, and we can work that out by looking at the quarterfinals, which take place in game week 29. So we've got Chelsea versus Leicester, Man City versus Newcastle, Manchester United versus Liverpool, and Wolves versus Coventry. So from these fixtures, I mean, we could probably argue about this one a little bit, but there is a favourite in each of these games. Chelsea should in theory beat Leicester. Wolves should in theory beat Coventry. Both Premier League teams facing lower division opposition, and hopefully that is going to mean a pretty straightforward, both of these teams, Chelsea and Wolves, going through into the semi-finals of the FA Cup, which means they can't play in the weekend slot of game week 34. You'd also have to say that Man City and Liverpool, absolute behemoths of English football, will probably beat their Premier League oppositions as well. Man City beating Newcastle and Liverpool beating Manchester United. So we need to start moving around some of those game week 34 fixtures that take place during the weekend slot. So let's move those fixtures across to game week 37, and we're starting to get a picture of what the rest of the season might look like. And guys, I just have to say that this is not the only solution to all of the fixtures and where they can be rescheduled to and where they can be moved to, but I believe this is the simplest solution, and the simplest solution is quite often the correct one. And also, this method of moving the fixtures just to the next open slot, you know, the game week 29 fixtures, for them, the next open slot will be game week 34, and those game week 34 fixtures, the next open slot will be game week 37. So you just keep moving them across, and that gives the Premier League plenty of time to warn fans about their teams' games being rescheduled, because that's a big thing this season. We're looking at the Premier League really want to make an effort to make sure that fans have plenty of advance notice of when their games are going to be rescheduled for. So doing this, moving them across for kind of 1 month in advance, that is going to be a way to do that quite easily. Now, I'm going to simplify Game Week 34 a little bit just for the purpose of the graphic, so we can have a better idea, a real proper look at who is having a single game week, who is having a double game week, and who is blanking as well. So straight away, we can see 2 teams are going to blank if this comes true. Fulham will be blanking and Spurs will be blanking as well. Neither team having a fixture in Game Week 34. So 2 potential blanks in Game Week 34. It's not guaranteed, of course. We are just making projections and predictions at this moment, but we can definitely see an idea that Spurs, a team a lot of us want those Spurs players for, well, they might actually blank in game week 34. And it leaves us with a few double game weeks confirmed, maybe if this goes to plan. That will be Bournemouth will have a double, we'll have Crystal Palace with a double, Everton with a double, Man United and Newcastle United with a double, and Sheffield United with a double game week there as well. So no real big teams with a double game week. We thought maybe Arsenal could potentially have a double game week in 34. That is looking less and less likely at the moment. So really, we are looking at maybe Man United, maybe Newcastle. You might want to have a look at them. You could possibly look at a Crystal Palace attacker for game week 34, Eze Elise. For Everton, maybe you go for Jordan Pickford in view of getting a goalkeeper for game week 34. They're double there. 2 fixtures from Pickford. Maybe that's not so bad. If you've got a Branthwaite on your bench as well, that's going to be another useful player. If you've got maybe Solanke in your team, he's got potential double here in 34 as well. I think Bournemouth are actually one of the less likely teams to have a double here because they could potentially move their double to 37 as well. But looking at this is what I think things are going to start to look like. For game week 37, there's more doubles there, and that looks like the bench boost week. Very, very clearly looks like the bench boost week. I don't think there's any real debate to be had here anymore. If you're going to bench boost, if you've still got your bench boost left, then 37 looks like the time to do it, because we're going to have doubles for Arsenal, for Brighton, for Chelsea, for Fulham, for Liverpool, for Manchester City, big club there, of course, Spurs and Wolves. So a lot of teams that we will want to be invested in anyway will have a lot of these players ready to go for a bench boost in game week 37. Now, a few people may say, game week 37, is that not a bit risky for a bench boost with many teams maybe rotating towards the back end of the season? Game week 38 is obviously the big risk for rotation, but 37, we don't typically see too much rotation unless teams are truly on the beach with nothing left to play for. But if we're talking about, Liverpool and Arsenal potentially there, and obviously Man City competing for the Premier League title with 3 games to go, are they really going to be rotating players? I'm not so sure about that one. Even teams like Spurs probably still looking to get into the top 4 at that stage, or secure a place in the top 4 if they're already in that position. So I actually don't think there's going to be too much rotation for some of these bigger teams that we'd want to be really invested in. So bench boost 37 really does look like the one at the moment, and it's pretty clear to see why. Okay, but what about this unscheduled fixture, Spurs versus Chelsea? It has been in the back end for a while now, for a couple of weeks. We need to figure out where this fixture is going to go, because it's the only fixture we haven't placed on this doubles and blanks projection calendar. Well, this is a real tough one. It could go in game week 32, 33, 35, 36, and it could even go in 34 if Chelsea were to lose to Leicester in their FA Cup quarter-final. In fact, if Chelsea do lose to Leicester in the quarter-final, I think that this Chelsea versus Spurs fixture will naturally fall into game week 34, with now Spurs not having a blank game week at all in game week 34, and that would actually give Chelsea a double game week in 34, a pretty tough double, to be fair, away against Arsenal, away against Spurs, but a double game week regardless. So that would be what happens if Chelsea lose to Leicester, but outside of that, it's probably not super likely, so we do need to look at these other game weeks. All of them clash with European competition, which is not ideal, but it's kind of the last opportunity, the last chance. Now, a few people have mentioned that potentially what the Premier League could do is try and wait for as long as possible before confirming when this fixture is going to go. I think really they can't really wait beyond game week 29, 30. They're going to have all the information by that point anyway to reschedule the remaining fixtures. But if they are leaving it late and trying to put in the fixture as late as possible, then we are potentially looking at 35 or 36. So this is probably the most likely time where the Chelsea Spurs double game week is going to go, one of 35 or 36. I'm personally not as confident as maybe some other people are that it's going to go in 35 or 36. I think ideally, if we want to, if it's guaranteed to clash with a UEFA competition fixtures, then we need to kind of make sure that maybe it's not at the same time as some really important games, particularly big games. If Arsenal go through, we're going to talk about London security and stuff like that. So if Arsenal are going through, if West Ham are going through to the later stages, then that could be a little bit problematic in game week 35 and 36. So we'll see what happens there. It is the one fixture that I'm just not confident at all at the moment to place. It could go anywhere, but just be aware it is going to go somewhere. We don't know for sure. There's a bunch of different options. I think most people are probably predicting 35 or 36. That's probably the most likely scenario, but do not hold your breath on that one. So let's start to simplify this this graphic a little bit more, just so you guys can get a clear picture. We're going to remove a lot of the European little icons that I put on screen to kind of remind us when the European games are going to take place. And you can see now what the remaining calendar is going to look like, what the remaining game weeks are going to look like for this FPL season, and it looks pretty interesting, and we've got to do something about this. Let's simplify it once more, just for you guys who maybe don't like to see loads of colors. I personally love loads of colors on a graphic, on a calendar, but I know some of you guys just care about when are the blanks going to be, when are the doubles going to be, and this will give you a much clearer idea because we've just got in green where the doubles are going to be, in black where the blanks are going to be, and in white everything else, just the normal game week. So that is obviously also going to be kind of useful to you maybe if you prefer to look at graphics this way, to give a very clear idea when are the doubles. I don't care about anything else, I just want to know when the double game weeks are. Well, here you go. Now, one thing you may have picked up on whilst I was going through these fixtures is that game week 29, 34, and 37 are the big ones. These are where key decisions are going to need to be made. Game week 29 being a blank game week, and game week 34 and 37 being double game weeks. Now, here is the real big problem. These three game weeks are completely incompatible with each other. The team that you are going to want for game week 29 is not going to be the same as the team you want for game week 34 and 37. So game week 29, for example, you're going to want players from Aston Villa, Brentford, Spurs, for example. Game week 34, you're not going to want Spurs players, and you're going to maybe want some players from, you know, Manchester United, Newcastle, maybe some Bournemouth players in there. And game week 37, a whole bunch of different teams again: Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester City, Tottenham Hotspur. So it is quite crazy to see how incompatible these three game weeks are. You will want a completely different team for each of these three. So how are we going to deal with this situation? How are we going to make sure we can maximize the amount of playing players we have for game week 29, as well as getting some doublers for 34 and a lot of doublers for 37 ready for that bench boost? And the answer to that question is using chips. So the free hit is really helpful for this. So free hit, we are probably looking at game week 29, 34, and 37. Of course, 37 we've already earmarked for our bench boost. So if you do have your bench boost left, you're probably not going to want a free hit in game week 37, but it is a possibility if you don't have your bench boost. So 29 and 34, they are really the only two game weeks for a free hit now. So you need to be thinking about one of these as a potential free hit option, and this will allow you to quickly pivot between your regular team, if you like, and then capitalize on the individual game week, whether that be 29 or 34, to get many players who actually play, or in game week 34's case, many players who actually double as well. So that is a big thing to think about. A wildcard is also going to be very, very useful. So there are three ways of using your wildcard, in my opinion, if you still have it. If you use it in game week 27 to 29, what you can do is set up for game week 29, potentially set up for game week 28 as well with some Bournemouth players. So in game week 30 or 31, that is when you've kind of dead-ended your team in previous game weeks. You know, you've built a team that you like for game week 29, and then you wildcard out of it, ready for game week 30, 31, maybe building towards a 34 team. Like, this looks very nice. And we've got, of course, the 35 and 36 wildcard opportunity where we are dead-ending into game week 34 instead. So we're building that team up all the way into game week 34, capitalize, get some maybe some double game week players in game week 34 that you might not necessarily want to own long term, and then you quickly wildcard them back out again in game week 35 and 36 in preparation for the big double game week in 37. So with this all in mind, there are three chip strategies that I think are going to work, and I think there are two ways of kind of categorizing these strategies that we're looking at right now, and it's going to depend on one thing: are you prepared for game week 29 or not? That is the question you need to be asking yourself right now. Now, a lot of people will say, okay, well, I mean, I'm not prepared for game week 29. Is that such a bad thing? No, it's not. So a lot of people actually chose to intentionally not prepare for game week 29, eyeing up some of these unprepared chip strategies. Some people, you know, maybe haven't committed to a chip strategy yet, and that's okay too if you're not quite committed, and because of that lack of committal, then maybe you're not prepared for game week 29, but it's fine. It is fine because there's actually more options for you if you're not prepared for Game Week 29. And if you are prepared for Game Week 29, your options in many ways are actually a little bit more limited, I suppose. So we would be looking at going for the patience strategy. You may have heard some of these names of strategies before that I've used. The patience strategy is the one for Game Week if you're prepared for Game Week 29 already. And if you are unprepared for Game Week 29, you find you do not have many players in your squad right now that work in Game Week 29, that play in Game Week 29, then we're going to have to go for the all-rounder strategy or the easy strategy. So let's go through each of these strategies and see how they might work for you. So first of all, the patient strategy. This includes a wild card in Game Week 30 or 31. So you're dead ending your team into Game Week 29, blank Game Week 29, resetting your team in 30 or 31. You'll then be free hitting in Game Week 34. Finally, a bench boost in 37. And yeah, it's just every one of these strategies, by the way, is going to have a 37 bench boost. It just looks the best by far, and we're looking for the best strategies, right? This is going to be most effective if you already have 6 or more players who play in Game Week 29. So players from Aston Villa, Brentford, Burnley, Fulham, Luton, Forest, Spurs, and West Ham United. If you have 6 or more players from those 8 teams, I think you're going to be absolutely fine to go into Game Week 29 with what you have. If you can easily get to 9 or more blank Game Week 29 players, even with a -4 hit, again, perfect. You are absolutely fine to do this strategy. And now I'm talking if you've got Richarlison, Pedro Porro, Ollie Watkins, maybe you've got a Douglas Luiz in your team, maybe you've got an Aston Villa defender in your team, maybe you've got Jared Bowen, maybe you've got Charlie Taylor on your bench, someone like that. So many players are actually playing and available in Game Week 29 that some of you guys might have, or others of you might not have them. But if you do have them, this is the strategy for you. There are some advantages and disadvantages. The big advantages for this strategy is that you can set yourself up nicely for the rest of the season with a Game Week 30 or 31 wildcard, drastically changing your team from a team that plays well in Game Week 29 and a team that is going to be good for the rest of the season. You're also going to have more information about double Game Week 37 and 34 and 37 from Game Week 30, because Game Week 29, that's when the FA Cup fixtures take place. And after that, we're going to get a lot of key information about exactly how the rest of the season pans out. Maybe we'll even get some Premier League official announcements on a lot of these predictions that we've made as well. So you'll have that information, you'll have that confirmation, which will be nice. And you're also going to be fully prepared for any late game chaos, because a free hit 34 is going to be very handy for that, as well as, you know, having that extra information when you are wildcarding. The disadvantages are that it requires your team to be already set up in a very specific way. You already have to have these players. You know, you cannot do this strategy if you don't have many players from Aston Villa, Brentford, Burnley, Fulham, Luton, Forest, Spurs, West Ham. You just cannot use this strategy. It's not possible. You may find your team is slightly weaker for 27 or 28. I don't think that matters too much, but it's definitely still a disadvantage going in with some slightly lower scores over the next 2 game weeks, and you may need to take hits in the short term as well. Aside from that, it's a very, very strong strategy that I think is going to work well for a lot of people. So the patient strategy is going to involve finish off building your team towards both double Game Week 28 and Game Week 29. That's what you're going to be doing first of all. Then what you're going to do is you're going to wildcard into a fresh and more normal looking team in Game Week 30 or 31. Use the new information you would have gained to continue building towards Game Week 37, as well as that Chelsea Spurs rescheduled fixture. If you get information about that in and around your wildcard in 30 or 31, you can start using that information straight away. Then what you're going to do is you're going to free hit in Game Week 34 to bring in double Game Week players for 1 week only. You do not need to buy players from Man United, Newcastle, Everton, Crystal Palace. You don't need to buy those players using your regular team, because you're going to bring them in for the free hit anyway. So you don't need these players. Only need them on a free hit. And then you're just going to continue building towards a Game Week 37 bench boost, bringing in those Spurs players, bringing in those Chelsea players, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, all of those really, really top players. You're going to be bringing in those players all the way up until Game Week 37, and then activate the bench boost. For those of you unprepared for Game Week 29, which includes myself, by the way, guys, you might want to consider the all-rounder strategy, which spreads your chips out quite evenly between now and the end of the season to try and take advantage that way. So this one's going to involve a wild card either in Game Week 27 right now or Game Week 28. Both game weeks work, and it's going to depend on how your team is looking right now. You'll be then looking to free hit in Game Week 34 once again, and Game Week 37 will be your bench boost. So it's similar to the last strategy, but you're actually going with a wild card a few game weeks early to try and make sure you can get some players for Game Week 28 with Bournemouth and Luton doubling, as well as Game Week 29 with all of those teams blanking. You want to get in some players who actually play. Reset your team, get those players in for the now, which is very, very useful, and then use your transfers for the remainder of the season. Now, this is going to be most effective if you have 5 or less blank Gameweek 29 players. You know, we know what players we're talking about by now, but if you've got 5 or less of them, then this is the kind of strategy you might want to be going for. You can do this if you are not particularly well prepared for Gameweek 28 either. So if you find you don't have any Bournemouth or Luton players and you want to capitalize on that game week, then this might be a good idea to go with this strategy. And you can also do it if you're just not totally happy with your squad anyway. If you've got a few injuries in your team, a few players that are stinking out your team, maybe you've got an Estupinian or a Trippier or a, you know, maybe a Dubravka, Areola goalkeeper combination. If you've got many of these players that actually you're totally unhappy with and you just want to remove them now, then wildcard now, you solve that problem as well as setting yourself up for a chip strategy for the rest of the season. Now, the advantage of this all-rounder strategy is it deals with any issues you have in your squad right now. As we just mentioned, you'll have more weeks to enjoy your wildcard. And this is a really, really important point, guys, because if you wildcard later on in the season, then you're only going to be able to use your new wildcard team for the last few game weeks of the season. If you do it now, you get to deal with all of your problems, remove all of those bad players that maybe other of your rivals might actually have to hold on to these bad players because they're not using a wildcard and they have priorities elsewhere to use their transfers on. This prepares you well for both Gameweek 28 and Gameweek 29, which is unique about this strategy, and you can easily deal with any Gameweek 34 surprises by using your free hit there as well. The disadvantages are you may have to keep some of your short-term picks from Gameweek 28 and 29 into the longer term. So if you have, you know, some West Ham players, some Luton players, I'm not sure what other players you might have that you might not want to keep long term. Maybe you have some Bournemouth players there as well. If you overinvest in those kind of players during your wild card, you will have to potentially keep some of them for the longer term. You can hopefully remove some of them, use your transfers to remove some of them, but you might have to keep a couple of them a little bit longer than you might naturally want to. You may even need to take hits to rebalance your team or prepare for that bench boost in the late game, because you're going to be wildcarding slightly earlier. You're not going to be as prepared for Game Week 37 bench boost. But given that there is 10 game weeks between now and the bench boost 37 game week, you probably will have enough time to sort this out with transfers alone. That's 10 transfers. That should be plenty to get yourself going. So for this strategy, you will be wildcarding into a team that covers both double Game Week 28 and blank Game Week 29. So that's the first thing that you are going to do. And then from Game Week 30, you're going to use any new information gained to build towards a slightly more normal team and towards a Game Week 37 bench boost. So you're going to fix your team, you're going to make some transfers, you may have to take a hit or two, and you're going to get your team back on track for the remainder of the season. Then in Game Week 34, you are going to free hit to remove those blanking Spurs players, because if you're wildcarding now, you're probably going to triple up on Spurs. But for the Game Week 34, Spurs might blank. So you're going to be able to use that free hit to remove those Spurs players. And then the week after, Game Week 35, you're going to have all of your Spurs players back in, ready to go for their potential double in 35-36 and their double in 37 as well. So that's going to work really, really nicely with Spurs players in particular to bring them in on your wildcard and hold them for the rest of the season. The only game week you have to worry about with Spurs players, you're going to be free hitting in anyway. Fantastic stuff. So yeah, you will just continue to build towards a bench boost in Game Week 37, and that would sort you out. But what would that wildcard look like? Okay, so I've just built a rough wildcard team for you guys, and bear in mind it is gone 5 a.m. right now, so I haven't had too much time to really go into building a proper wildcard, but I've just done a rough one for you. Maybe we'll do another wildcard, a whole wildcard video, maybe on Friday for you guys to check out for a slightly more accurate and up-to-date team after any team news that we have. Guys, of course, I built this team using the Fantasy Football Hub My Team tool. If you would want to start planning out your teams and your future game weeks yourself, you can do so. Click in the link at the top of the description to start planning out your team. Super useful tool. It has been invaluable for me in terms of planning those later game weeks and what I'm going to do each game week with my transfers. But yeah, this is the kind of team we'd be looking at. Like I say, triple Spurs works really well for the next few game weeks. This gives you plenty of players for game week 29. It gives you 3 double game week players for game week 28 as well, and you're probably going to be able to rebalance it quite nicely from game week 30 onwards as well, I suppose. So yeah, this looks pretty good. It looks fine. You are going to have to make some major changes from game week 30 and beyond, but it sets you up really nicely for the next 3 game weeks, and that's what this is all about. Finally, the easy strategy, and this one is going to be the most popular because it is the easiest one to do. It really is. It's very straightforward, and I think this strategy, I maybe gave it a bit of a bad rap when we last made a chip strategy video, which was a few game weeks ago, but I think things have changed a little bit as the appeal for the likes of Aston Villa players, West Ham players, Luton Town players perhaps even, the appeal for those players has gone down a little bit, and therefore, are they players you want to own long term? Well, they're players you have to own for Game Week 29 to get a full squad, right? But you don't want to own them long term. You don't want to own them now particularly. You don't want to own them beyond Game Week 29 either. So what's the solution to that? The easy strategy, which allows you to free hit all of these kind of players in for one game week only. So Game Week 29, free hit, build yourself a full team. We're going to be looking at a Game Week 29 free hit team in just one moment, guys, so you can kind of see what team you would have in Game Week 29. Then after that, we'll be looking at wildcarding in Game Week 35 or 36. And then a bench boost in 37. So you're going to be wildcarding very shortly before a bench boost, so you can fully set up a bench boost using your wildcard chip. Now, I know a few people straight away are going to say, free hit in 29, Game Week 29 does not look that strong. It looks kind of weak, actually. Maybe some people would say similar things about Game Week 34 free hit. Maybe you think that looks kind of weak. The point is, when you're free hitting, it's not about the individual week in which you free hit. It's about the game weeks around it and what free hitting in an individual week allows you to do in the game weeks outside of it. Free hitting in Game Week 29, sure, it's not going to be the highest scoring game week in the world, of course it isn't, but it allows you to continue with your team without being forced into buying West Ham players or Luton players that you don't really want. That is the point of the free hit, what it allows you to do around the game week rather than in the specific game week. So just wanted to put that one out there for anyone who's worried about a Game Week 29 free hit. It is absolutely perfectly viable, not necessarily for the reasons you might naturally think. But anyway, this strategy is going to be most effective if you have 5 or less blank Game Week 29 players. It's going to work well if you are not particularly well prepared for Game Week 29 at all. And if you're just, you just want to use a chip now, you're not prepared, you want to use a chip now, get that done, and just go ham for the late game. This is a late game strategy. It really is. The advantages of which is it maximizes your points potential in blank Game Week 29. You don't have to prepare for or keep players that are useful only for Game Week 29, and it maximizes your points potential in Game Week 37. Believe me, guys, this is the best strategy if you want to maximize Game Week 37. It really is. The disadvantages, of course, is that you will only have a few weeks to use your wildcard squad. So if you've got any problems in your team right now, too bad. You're stuck with many of these players and you might not be able to make any transfers naturally, particularly if you are looking to Game Week 34 and trying to maybe get a couple of double game week players there. You're going to have other focuses and you might have to keep players for maybe slightly longer than you'd want to because you are wildcarding so late on in the season. If your team and your squad is looking actually pretty healthy right now, then that's not going to be an issue for you, of course. You may not be able to take advantage of Game Week 34 either without a couple of hits, but for some of you guys, you'll be looking at Game Week 34 and thinking, Man United, Newcastle, Bournemouth, I don't care about these teams. I don't really care about that double game week anyway. And if you don't care, this is definitely the strategy for you because this is probably the strategy that gives you the least amount of potential for that particular game week. But yeah, there's always going to be advantages and disadvantages to each of these strategies. Let's go through this one week by week. So your short-term focus will be to bring in players in preparation, not for Game Week 29, but in preparation for Game Week 28 and Game Week 30 and beyond. If you're already sorted with your Bournemouth and your Luton players for Game Week 28, then let's start planning for Game Week 30 now. Yes, seriously, you can start doing that right now and trying to think about players you would want for the slightly longer term there as well. That is a huge advantage of this strategy. In Game Week 29, you get a free hit in Game Week 29 to sell all of those blankers and buy players with fixtures for one game week only. From Game Week 30, you're going to use your transfers as normal with a view to dead end your team into double Game Week 34, which is one advantage of this strategy is that if you just fancy 1 or 2 punts on, a Crystal Palace player or an Everton player, then you can bring them in for one game week and wildcard back out of them in Game Week 35. Reset your team, include Spurs and Chelsea players ready to see if they have a double in that period there, as well as setting up yourself for a bench boost in 37. And of course, in Game Week 37, your bench boost and your strategy is complete. So we've still got a couple of game weeks before before Game Week 29 takes place. But I thought it would be interesting at least to have a look at what a Game Week 29 free hit might look like. So this is what I've come up with. Flecken in goal, Doughty, Moreno and the Doggy, 3 very attacking defenders in defense, to see if you can maybe cheese some attacking returns, because you know clean sheets are going to be hard to find as always. Flecken against Burnley at least might get you a clean sheet there. In midfield, you've got to double up on Spurs with Son and Richarlison playing against Fulham. Real strong players there, as well as maybe going for the likes of Bowen, Alanga, Douglas Luiz, Bailey. These are the kind of players you might want to go for. Maybe if you fancy Ross Barkley as well in midfield, they're all going to work. And then up front, Tony and Watkins seem to be absolute must-haves for a Game Week 29 free hit, as well as a third player. I've gone for Morris, but maybe Adebayo could be a potential player here as well. Or if you really want to go for our knee as the Nottingham Forest striker against Luton, that could work as well. There are some few options there for the third striker slot, but as long as you've got Tony and Watkins, I think that's going to work. You can maybe even go for a 3-5-2 formation as well. We've got a couple of players on the bench there as well, but we won't pay too much attention to them, because I think the key really is go for a goalkeeper you think is going to keep a clean sheet, and go for some defenders you think will get attacking returns, because clean sheets are just a myth at the moment, aren't they, guys? But oh wait, what about the triple captain? We haven't spoken about the triple captain in this video. Well, some of you might still have the triple captain chip. Probably not many of you, but let's talk about it very briefly before we wrap up the video. So first of all, I should say the triple captain chip is not really part of a chip strategy. In many ways, it is just an afterthought. The main chips for a chip strategy are the wild card and the free hit. Maybe the bench boost to a degree, because a bench boost might be impacted directly from your wildcard, for example, or your free hit. Triple captain really is an afterthought. It's the least powerful chip, and you should kind of be looking to use it only after you figured out where the rest of your chips have gone, so to make sure the triple captain does not clash or override any of your other chips. Remember, it's 1 chip per week. Here are some of the options between now and the end of the season. If you do happen to have your triple captain chip, you can go for Solanke in Game Week 28 against Sheffield United and Luton. Hoyland, potential double game week there against Newcastle and Sheffield United. Manchester United fans, you might fancy a Manchester United triple captain. Hey, just putting it out there. For Game Week 35 and 36, we could see Palmer and Son have double game weeks there, so maybe you might want to consider them. And Game Week 37, as long as you do not have your bench boost, you are not bench boosted in 37, which should be very, very few of you who both have a triple captain and don't have a bench boost. Well, 37 is going to be a triple captain opportunity for you, where you could go for some of the bigger players, Haaland, Salah, Son. Very, very nice indeed. The fixtures aren't perfect, but hey, they looked pretty good for Haaland last time around, and didn't quite go to plan, did it? So you never know. This time around, it might be a little bit better. So let's throw the fixture calendar on screen once again and just say, guys, this is how I think things are going to look like for the rest of the season. This is using the same methods as I've used in previous seasons to try and guesstimate where the doubles are going to be, where the blanks are going to be, and hopefully some of my logic that I've spoken about during this video makes sense to you guys as well, and you followed along quite nicely, and hopefully it's helped you make some chip decisions as well. So guys, thank you for watching. I do want to say, if you wouldn't mind liking the video, that is really all I ask for you. A like would mean so much to me. Obviously, it is super, well, early in the morning, and I haven't slept yet. I wanted to put the effort in for you guys to make sure you have the maximum amount of time possible to make these key decisions, so hopefully that helps you out there. Do subscribe if you haven't done already. We might do another wildcard Game Week 27 draft, which you might be interested in as well. But aside from that, guys, make sure you check out another video if you want to. Check out Fantasy Football Hub in the description, and I will see you later, mates.